I would like for you to go through and take a look at what things you were able to accomplish this past year and what things you're hopeful for this next year. And we'll leave a lot of the issues like for the fire departments and homeless and some of those things to get into those issues in the questioning point. Would that be all right with you?
However you want to do it, John. You know, I meet with you guys at least once a year, sometimes more. I'm always happy to talk about whatever you want and in whatever format you want. So I'm
Well,
happy to.
that's appreciated, and we do appreciate you coming to us. And this is your last year of service with us as a council member, so we're always interested in what things you have to say about our community, what's going on in District Three, what are the positive things that are happening over here, and the negative things as well, and what you expect for the future. So I'll turn the floor over to you and give you a few minutes on that. We have a lot of issues we'd like to get through for tonight, so let's do that, and we'll leave it to you at that point. Floor is yours, sir.
Great. Well, there's so many different directions to take it. I know you like to do a lot of Q&A, so I'll try to be brief so we can get to that. And yes, this is my last year. I'm termed out at the end of this year in December. But even being termed out, I will still be a Woodland Hills resident and a member, a caring member of this community. And this community is always in my heart, and I will continue to serve in every way that I can. In terms of the council, I've always tried to be a coalition builder on the city council, trying to enact good policy. Sometimes that means making sure that the perfect isn't the enemy of the good and getting good things done. Overall, I mean, one of the best things I've been able to do, not so much just this year, but is something that many of you were involved with, which was getting the Warner Center plan over the finish line. That 2035 plan helped significantly toward getting the goal of balancing residential and commercial growth, and not losing sight, though, of the Valley Dream of why we're all out here. And that has played out in many good ways. We've seen incredible developments of which everyone here has been a part of. The good, bad, and the ugly. I always make sure that I work with the community on whatever developments are there in terms of the city's role, and have continued to do that this year. Overall, in terms of big accomplishments, I mean, I've also made a number of swing for the fences, which we've done some really great things that are coming to fruition this year, but have been long-term projects. Things like the facelift for the Madrid Theater. That's a $15 million project. That theater is going to be up and running by the end of the summer. The big ice skating rink in Reseda, which is has become a $30 million project. Nobody thought could actually happen. It had been a bond measure for $3 million back in the late 90s, but that is now up and running, and we will be on the ice, all of us celebrating that by this summer as well. We have the Canoga Park Arts Hub, which was a creation of a way to kind of put a lot of development together in around the idea of the arts in Canoga Park, which not only includes the Madrid Theater, but saving what was the West Valley Playhouse or Cole Porter Theater, making that into the Tosco Theater. All these things came to fruition this last year, or some of them are now headed to being finalized this year. We built a number of parks in the district, whether it's early on the Aliso Creek, Caballero Creek, the Haynes Street, the Fire Station Park, which is right off Canoga, which was a little parklet. Bike paths along the river, where we almost completed the entire river bikeway from the headwaters in Canoga all the way, ultimately to the Sepulveda Basin, but really as a 51-mile linear park. Together, we've also weathered some serious storms, whether it's COVID or fiscal calamities or the Woolsey fire. Anyway, there's so much going on, and obviously I know you want to talk about some of the things that are developments, as always, like Woodland Hills Country Club, and I'm happy to talk about that, but I'll save that. You asked for a very quick overview. Homelessness I can't not talk about that as well. We've put a number of interventions in for homelessness to try to get people off the streets. A lot of them, have been very successful. All of them are full. The one that's had some issues was the one in the tiny home in Tarzana. But part of the commitment I made to the folks there was that if it wasn't, if the impacts weren't reduced by the time of the 3-year contract, we'd figure out a way to remove it, and we're in the process of removing that one. And we've also in Woodland Hills, of course, we last year or the year before we were talking about how there had to be something in Woodland Hills, but where should it be? Where we ended up was with the 818 Hotel, which became the Woodlands, a family shelter, which is actually run by the county, but we were involved as a city. That has had no problems, and it's much better than it was before, where it was the hotel with all these, with prostitution and drugs and police situations. That's now serving families. It served a lot of families. I was there for the holidays. It was a very nice event. And then next door to that is what was the extended stay. That's now a senior permanent supportive housing, and that's helping a lot of seniors. Also, I'm sure you have not heard of many problems there either. Both of those both of those places are being well run, and and it's good that now Woodland Hills, just like every other community in the district, is participating in finding solutions for folks who are on the streets. But at the same time, in the West Valley, we also make it very clear that the streets are not a place for people to be living, and that we want to make sure that certain key corridors are where homelessness is prohibited, or overnight camping or encampments are prohibited. We had that whole issue with the Winnetka Underpass, where we were able to make that into a 4118 zone. I was the author of 4118. It's controversial, but I think it's very helpful in terms of keeping certain critical corridors clear. At the end of the day, like I've always said to you and to the group, it's a balancing act. We've got to lead with compassion and create opportunities for people, but we also have to make sure that the public right of way is used by the public and is not privatized by anyone, whether they have money in a business or whether they're down and out. It's still the public right of way. So, always happy to talk more about homelessness, SB 79, all the different projects that are out there. But I will stop there because I know that you like to spend most of the time on Q&A, and I'll just leave it there.
Well, Bob, I appreciate that, and it's one of the big criticisms I guess about me is I always want to interrupt and ask questions about things, but that seems to come with the territory as well. I think first let's talk about the homeless issues that are going on. I know Colleen, I think, had some questions she had about that, especially over with the facility that's at next to the 818 facility. There's been some difficulties on that. Colleen, if you can unmute yourself, I think you had some questions that you and I had talked about concerning that before.
I think John, it was me.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was you. Sorry,
Yeah.
Shelley. That you're absolutely right. Go ahead.
No problem,
Okay.
John. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And again, Bob, we have to say thank you because you did really spearhead the 4118 and clearing the underpasses.
Yep.
And making it safe for the community and the TAF students, to get back and forth to school. And I know it is controversial. Sorry about that. The issue is when these projects were announced, the community was told that there would be a community advisory committee or board formed to meet periodically to talk about issues that are coming up with that the community has, meeting with the people running it, with your office. And that committee or that steering committee was never formed. So the community has absolutely no input as we were promised, because as you said, one was a county, one was a city, and the community had no say in either. And so we were promised this type of steering committee, and that has never happened. So I was wondering if that's something that you can make happen as we were promised.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, the county one, even if we try to get them, even if they're not going to participate, well, we will ask them to participate, but we're happy to get it going anyway. Since a lot of because Hope the Mission, who is the one who runs that one, they have been very good about, like, on our other two cabin community committees, they participate in those meetings. So I'm happy to get that going. I know, we haven't had you're the first one to mention that, we talked to some people early on and there wasn't a lot of interest, but I would love it if you're interested to work with my team. I would love to put that together.
I know that there's several community members, CAP people, because for years we've been promised it, and I know there's been a change, in your office with our liaison, and so I think that's important because there are a few issues that are coming to light that I'm hearing as part of the neighborhood council and being on the WHO board that are very recent. So you may not even be aware of them. And one of them is that occupants are not being allowed to park on the facilities if they have a car because most of them don't have insurance. And unfortunately, some are now renting their cars out to other homeless to live in on Ventura Boulevard. So that's an issue.
This is the first I've heard of that, so I'm happy to look into that and to get it's a different provider than Hope the Mission, but we'll get them engaged as well because you're talking about occupants of the extended stay.
No, I believe they're occupants of the Hope of the Mission.
Okay, and they're renting their car out to others.
Yeah, that's what some of the people who work in the neighborhood office buildings have talked to some of the individuals they've been seeing every morning getting out of the cars, and they've admitted that they're renting them from people who are living in Hope of the Mission because they don't have insurance. And if you don't have insurance, I guess you can't park your car in the Hope of the Mission parking lot.
Well, I'm happy to work with you, Shelley, on that and get a group together of interested folks.
Bob, I think that's why a community task force would be helpful with that because it provides information that may not come to you directly that you would get now. But of course, the homeowners organization would be happy to participate in that. And I think we should get something together with that because this is something that's going on, not just with 818, but also with the other facility too. Shelley, was there any other issues that you were having that was coming up with the elder facility?
The only other thing with the elderberry is that we do know, and I've had a few emails from people that we know that they are over 55, but because the facility, and I know they're doing a really good job, but we recognize as community members a lot of the occupants, and they are addicts, a lot of them. They are people with mental illness problems. That doesn't go away just because you're over 55. And it does operate under the Housing First model, which means you're not required, services are offered, but of course you're not required to abide by it. And there are community members who are saying they are seeing drug sales going on and et cetera. So I think it would be best to get the community involved sooner than later with those issues.
And also, Bob, there was some question about if there is homeless being spotted. We talked to the senior lead officer at our last meeting, and her comment was that don't call LAPD, really call your office and let them know where those things are because the LAPD doesn't really have the abilities to respond to it in the same way that you do. Only thing they can do is go out if there's any kind of a crime that's being committed. But if there's an area that's being abused, shall we say, by some of the homeless people that are out there, that really needs to come to your attention so that you can take the appropriate action. Is that still the correct way? And if so, who's the major contact person at your office?
Well, it depends. You can always call my office if there's any question. We're always happy. And if we don't, if we don't have a solution, we'll send you to the right people. So don't ever hesitate if there's a question. Right. It's obviously not illegal to be homeless. So there's no reason to call the police unless somebody is doing something that is criminal activity. Now, if someone is in a 4118 zone, usually you can let the police know. The first thing they'll do is give them a warning to say you're not allowed to be in this zone, and they will not arrest somebody until they've given them a chance to vacate the zone. But really, the best thing is to engage the service providers, and we've got the LA HOP and the 211 system in my office as well to try to help you navigate that because ultimately there's not someone you could just send and if somebody's not willing to leave a location and it's not a 4118 zone, you cannot force them to leave that location. But you can go out there and you can offer them services. When it gets bad, you can do cleanups like we did with Palm Island next to the Marriott Hotel. We've had about 14 different cleanups in that location to try to keep that free of encampments. There's a success story there now. We have park rangers there. We're able to make it into it is a park site. So we were able to engage the park rangers where they weren't before to try to get some signs up, because you are not allowed to have encampments in a rec and park area.
And make it clear for our members what a 4118 area is or zone is, so that they know if they're in it or not in it.
Well, there are signs that indicate when it's a 4118 zone. So 4118 zone is a designation that of not allowing encampments in a particular area. And under the city law, the way it is now, you can make 4118 zones either within 1,000 feet of an intervention, meaning like the extended stay or the 818, and you can create a zone around that. You can create 500 feet within a school. Within an underpass, it's 500 foot. It doesn't mean it's automatically a 4118 zone, but the council can designate it so. I've designated all of the underpasses in my district as 4118 zones.
And what's your attitude? What's your attitude with the city council now on supporting you on any requests you might have for the future? Are they hostile to that, or are they willing to cooperate with you now?
It is always a close vote.
Okay.
There is half or less than half the council does not support 4118. It's usually about 3 or 4 no votes on anyone that you put together, depending on how many people are there. I mean, so far I've been successful in all of the zones that I've designated, and I've been able to get them through. But I've also been able to demonstrate why, we don't do it arbitrarily. We do it under the rules, whether it's an underpass and we're allowed to designate it, or whether if there's been a certain amount of crime that you can document, you can use that as a leverage point. But you have to make findings, and there's a number of things you have to do to designate something as a 4118 zone. But every time we've done it, we've been successful.
And our last meeting, the senior lead officer indicated that Grace from your office was handling those particular complaints. Is that still the situation? Yeah,
Grace and Keith both are focused on homelessness. Alice is on Woodland Hills. Again, those are the key people, but I don't expect everyone to always have to write down and talk to the exact right person. You call my office. We are a no wrong door office. We will get you to the right person. But Grace does an amazing job. Keith does an amazing job, in terms of dealing with the homeless issues. And then you've got Alice, who's working hard on Woodland Hills stuff.
It sounds good. Shelley, you had some more. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know, Councilman, you've worked really hard on the 4118. You've worked really hard to get, working with Judge Carter and get the number of housing that we needed. But at the same time, it's kind of like, as Captain Lopez said at a CPAP meeting one time, if you build it, they will come. And I would assume that we have probably one of the larger counts of beds, whether they're tiny cabins, tenant supported housing, of other districts in the valley. And so we have that problem. And I know it's been brought up at some meetings that homeless freely admit, even though they're not supposed to be told by providers from other areas, they are told, and I know you can't in Hills, they have X number of beds. And so everyone we see, like at Palm Island or on Ventura, are from here. They're told either by their friends, you'll get housed, or sometimes actually other providers. And I think that's especially difficult because with the Grants Pass decision, we're the only neighboring area that isn't abiding by the Grants Pass decision of the Supreme Court that said you can clear the streets. So I'm pretty sure we're getting a lot more in LA from our neighboring cities.
Well, when you use our interchangeably with district and with city, I would not say that we have so much more beds than other districts.
We have, I think, then you've worked really hard. I think in your last email, you talked about 540 beds. I didn't know if that was permanent supportive housing or all the beds we have, but that's quite a high number in relation to the number of homeless.
Well, we've gotten the right number for our number of homeless. We actually have fewer homeless than almost every other district in the city. So a lot of districts have a lot more beds, and they also have a lot more homeless folks. So that's an issue. I mean, I get what you're saying. And by the way, the Grants Pass decision, it didn't exactly say you can just clear the streets.
You have to offer a bed. Yes.
Well, what it said was that you have to that the Eighth Amendment is not a justification for prohibiting removal of people from encampments. But there are we've been dinged in the city of Los Angeles by different courts for a number of reasons of why when we remove people from encampments, why we get sued and why we lose. One of the key reasons why in the past was the Eighth Amendment, and that's what the Grants Pass decision focused on, and said that cruel and unusual punishment is something that happens after conviction, not before conviction, and therefore they basically vacated that as a reason for prohibiting cities from removing encampments. But there have been other cases that have other reasons that make it difficult. So I guess all I'm saying is that I think there's a lot of misunderstanding out there about what Grants Pass was and wasn't. Nonetheless, I do agree with you that we need to, Grants Pass was a critical decision, and it should, it should be reflected here in Los Angeles as well as in other cities. But it was not a blanket license to make the streets off limits to encampment.
Bob, let's move on to the over to Dignity, the Dignity Memorial Center they're putting in over at the old tree property.
Right.
What's the status of that present? By the way, are the dogs coming from your house, or I got some dogs barking somewhere?
Yeah, I had some dogs that were barking. I don't know why they were barking, but
Okay.
I put you on mute for a little bit, but
All
I
right,
didn't want to get up and check on them because.
No, I got you. Just want to make sure that I'm cutting them out where I can.
Yeah.
The situation with the Dignity Memorial Cemetery, a lot of people had some concerns about that because the plans were not really vented to the community. By the way, that's sort of a problem that we're all yelling and screaming about generally, is a lot of these projects are not coming to the community for us to be vetting them in some fashion. They're just doing them. And as we'll talk about in a bit with the Woodland Hills Country Club, a lot of the ordinances out of Sacramento are just stripping us and being disrespectful to the community on our abilities to be able to control our own destiny and having local control over things. What's going on with the cemetery? What do you understand to be the present situation with it, and what are the protections now for the community so that it's not going to become something that's a problem?
Right. So, and I agree with the first part of that, which is a lot of when you say things that brought to the community, to me that's synonymous with brought to the city council, because it's through the council that the community traditionally has had a voice. Because when it has to come for a discretionary hearing in the council, we have public hearings. We go to the neighborhood council. There's CEQA. There's all of those engagements which cause the community to be engaged. When laws are made on the state level that remove the council's discretion, it's removing the discretion of the community as well. Now, the cemetery, interestingly though, that is not due to a state law. That's actually the reason why that can happen ministerially and non-discretion, that it is a non-discretionary act, is actually the city planning code that was years ago created what's known as the public benefits process. And under the LA code, cemeteries are considered a public benefit project and can legally be approved ministerially, meaning without a discretionary process, if they meet certain performance standards listed in the zoning code. And for a cemetery, and this is section like 1400 A1 of the code, generally they're designed things. They're designed to shield the community from visual noise, impacts, traffic. And I can pull up that actual code if you're interested. But there are standards as part of that code, like the building has to be 300 feet from a street. In an A or an R zone property or residential. Security, night lighting has to be shielded. There has to be a solid decorative masonry or wrought iron fence at least 8 feet high. There are things like that about setbacks. The front yard has to be set back. But all that is to be said, if you do all those things, you can do a cemetery by right in that zone. So there's not a lot that I can do as a council member to change that. Even if I were to go back in and somehow change the underlying statutes, which have been there for years, about about the public benefits project, this project's already vested, and they've applied, and the rules when they applied are the rules that apply to them.
I think
But
if nothing else, what people would like to see is that there's some kind of a community input to it. They at least would come to the community and say in a public forum, this is what we're doing and what we're doing at that location, even if we can't change it, because right now people don't know, and the speculations become kind of overwhelming sometimes as to what's going to go on there.
yeah, yeah, and by the way, it was in the like early 2000s, before I was in office, that the city put the idea of a cemetery into the public benefits section of the code. But I mean, we can work with the developers to try to get them to voluntarily come in and work with us. We're encouraging them, and I've done this before, to go to the neighborhood council and to other community groups. But I don't have the kind of leverage that we have on other projects where I can mandate that they do this or that. But I have been encouraging them. I think that they will. They generally, seem like they're open to that. And I should say it's, I don't take a position on this one way or the other. It doesn't come before me for a discretionary vote. But I should say, like, the number of things that could go there that would be much, much more dense and much, much more traffic by right. There are a lot of things. Like a cemetery is one of the least impactful things that can go there. We saw what the earlier proposal from the previous group that almost built something was, with all the housing and everything else. And then if you take into account some of the state laws, the new state laws that are affecting the Woodland Hills Country Club, some of those laws could be potentially used on this site as well.
I think that's true. Do we know, for example, what they're going to use for the ingress and egress? And do we know if there's going to be a crematory on the location? Have you got any kind of details as to what they're actually going to do, and how many cemetery plots are going to be? Anything above ground, or is all below ground? Do we know?
They have said very publicly and in writing that there will be no crematorium.
Right.
And I can dig that up where they have said that. I don't have that as a legal condition like I would if there was a discretionary process,
Right.
but they have been very upfront about that they have some crematorium, some other place, I don't remember where, but that's not that far, that their business model, A, they're making the commitment that they won't have a crematorium, and B, their business model doesn't really, it makes sense for them to have the crematorium.
Let's take a look at over at Walnut Acres, where there's apparently a home that's being demolished for another home to go in with a whole bunch of ADUs. What's the story with that? And is that something that we should be aware of, that's going to be a new wave of the future?
I need a little bit more information of what you're referring to. So,
Marty, if you've got a chance, I think you've got some more information on that. If you're going to mute yourself, and maybe you can fill in some of the details on that. Go ahead, mute yourself, Marty.
Are you talking about the appeal of the lot split?
Yes, it's the lot split issue.
That's the one I wrote a letter opposing that lot split. That was a flag lot. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, that's the issue. And what now there's a hearing coming up this coming week to ask that the 70-foot midline requirement be just thrown out, so that they could basically split the lot and then build whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, and so Elizabeth from my staff is going to be at that hearing to represent my position that I've been very public about, and so we will continue to oppose the lot split.
Is that something we can expect coming on in the future of what people want to do out here in this part of the West Valley?
I think, ADUs have been incentivized in multiple ways. I would expect to see a lot more of that, yeah.
What's going on with the promenade? As we all know, that they're starting to tear it down now at this point. We understand that PF Chang's is going to stay in operation during that process. What do you know about what they're doing over there, and how much are they going to be putting in? As you know, that we've been blessed with a number of our members have been helping with some of the designs on that. We've had a number of meetings with the organization over there on that. What's your input as to what's going on with the promenade?
Well, as you know, demolition has started there. I think everyone knows, but the promenade site, maybe not, so I should state, the Kroenke Group purchased the promenade site. They also purchased the Anthem site. They also purchased the village. They are the largest landowner. Stan Kroenke, in particular, and his group, the Kroenke Group, is the largest landowner in the district. They are also the largest landowner in America, is what I read recently. So they have a lot of plans for for the area. The Rams, they're still trying to figure out exactly what entitlements they need ultimately. But as we all know, they've moved their somewhat they call it temporary, but they're long-term temporary headquarters, and ultimately they're going to build a permanent headquarters. But that's on the Anthem site. On the Promenade site, they're still, they haven't come to the city formally for a lot of this, but they have they've made their plans pretty public about what they want to do. With it's going to be 5.5 acres as a park. There's going to be 2 million. What they're saying is 2 million square feet of retail and office space. The entire village is going to be LEED certified with solar power, stormwater retention. In addition to the Rams, they have mixed-use development with residential, retail, parkland, office uses, a lot of open space, an indoor entertainment venue. Potentially two of them. One I think was 2,500 people. The other was 3,000, which is still beneath the number that was entitled when the Westfield owned it. So they are starting that process. I think ultimately it's going to be about 10 years for them to complete all of that.
That looks like it's a long time. When we were working with them, the project is rather extensive in a lot of areas and will be pretty amazing once it's completed. But I think right now, the only they'll see developing immediately is going to be apartment complexes, basically in the area of the northeast quadrant of the Promenade property.
Right.
Well, that sounds good. It sounds like it'll be a positive thing for the community as well. We'll see how that develops and what kind of input we're able to have with the developers at that stage. Speaking of
apartments there, and then we've also had the influx of jobs with the as you may know, as a lot of folks know, we have a really exciting project where the old Catalina Yachts facility was,
Yes.
where it's now going to be a major job center with movie studios, where they are renting out 6 full sound stages,
and they have two extraordinarily large ones that are some of the biggest sound stages I've seen that are around. We did a walkthrough on that quite a while ago, and that looks like an extraordinary project they've got over there. Let's hope they're going to be able to do that. The city has got to be, hopefully you're doing something to help with getting some of that production here back into this area. Because as you know, everybody's been fleeing the state and fleeing the city too, because the taxes and everything else have been just so high, and the incentives are not there.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned. I mean, I've been a big advocate for keeping the entertainment industry here. When I was in the legislature, I was the author of one of the authors. I was a co-author of the film tax credits, and I was on a state film commission for a number of years. And in fact, just today, I passed in council a bill to try to get the city to look at the creating incentives for the vertical or what they call micro dramas or vertical dramas, which is what is the sort of the biggest thing right now in entertainment, which is when you have those little shows that you see on your phone that are that's why they call them vertical dramas. That is really where a lot of filmmakers are getting their start, doing these little shorts that are incredibly profitable. But that is a really the burgeoning part of the entertainment industry. And we're having our lunch served to us. China is spending billions. It's supposed to be a $15 billion industry moving forward. And, right now they're fleeing. I mean, I know a lot about this because my brother's a TV producer and does a lot of the micro production. And in fact, he was the one who inspired me to do this legislation because he talks about all the folks who are fleeing. So we did a legislation that passed today. You can read about it. It's in the Hollywood Reporter and the Daily News and a lot of different places. I think it's on the news right now, actually, on one of the major networks, where that passed. And the idea behind it is to incentivize this kind of production through local incentives, because it's much cheaper to incentivize these productions. These productions typically are $200,000 or less. Figure out a way to do faster permits. I also worked with the unions who were originally reluctant to support this kind of thing because oftentimes these smaller productions are not union. but we worked with them to say to add into the report what threshold could they start paying into health care for their workers, without disrupting the industry. So a lot of progress on that front. And since you mentioned it, today was a banner day for that because we got that legislation passed.
That's good. Turn, if you will, for a moment to both the police department and the fire department and the budgeting issues with them and the fact that they're understaffed and trying to get people that are coming to them. And also touch with us about the fire department going around the city council to try to get something on the ballot to put a tax on so that they can raise some monies for some of the infrastructure. Where are we at both with LAPD and with the fire department as well? That could affect, I guess, our pocketbooks at some point in the future.
Sure, there's a lot to unpack in that question. There's a lot going on. I mean, that is obviously the biggest part of the city's budget. So when the city is suffering financially, if the biggest part of our budget is public safety, then public safety is suffering financially as well. Although we've continued every year to increase both police and fire funding consistently, and that has always happened since I've been on the council. Just to go, I'll go to the macro level in a second, but on the micro level, I want you to know that I've been working really closely with our local PD to try to do things to be force multipliers. For example, we've introduced some technology I was able to help fund with some discretionary dollars to get ALPRs, and drones, license plate readers and drones to be operating in the West Valley. It's new technology. It allows the police to be more effective. It's a force multiplier. I spent $1.1 million in discretionary dollars to basically purchase more than 60 of these automated license plate reader cameras that the police are working on getting up in the district, and that's going to really help as well. They should be up and running by this summer.
We heard that the drones were pulled downtown. They took the drones out of the valley in the West Valley. At least that's what the LAPD told us in our last meeting. That we don't have them out here anymore. They pulled them out.
No, well, I talked to them about that. They say that they needed money. I gave them $325,000 for drones at Topanga Division to be part of the real-time crime center.
How long ago was that?
Not long ago. I mean, it was. I think the motion to move the money was probably last month.
Okay, well, maybe something has changed since our meeting. Meeting in December said that basically they were disappointed that they had pulled the drones out for here, that they didn't like the drones that they were using and needed some different drones. Apparently, they weren't functioning properly, so we lost the drones out there.
They did centralize the drones, and I was very upset about that. And basically they said, well, if you want to pay for these stations, then we could keep a couple of them here. And I said, yes. So that's why. So
they should be reinstated at some point here.
Reinstated or instated. I don't know that, whatever it is. I mean, we have a motion. They've got the money. They're supposed to be using the drones out of the Topanga Division. We can follow up with that exactly to help.
That would be good. I think that everybody was very supportive of what they were doing with the drones because they were using them just strictly to be monitoring things, and especially if there were calls coming in, they could respond and see whether or not it was worthwhile sending out any cars, or it would be just.
They make a lot of. I mean, you can get to a scene faster than a helicopter. Yeah. They give you a vantage point for officers on the scene, so you can see who's there, if they have a weapon, etc. It saves time and money, and it makes the department more efficient. I know people have fears about drones. These are not military. They are not weaponized drones. These are not that kind of thing. They're not. They are there to be sort of a quick first responder.
Yeah, we understand they can be out in roughly about 2 minutes from the time a call comes in. They can give some kind of eyes in the air to see whether or not what's going on and who's there, and whether or not they need to deploy some of the resources otherwise.
Right.
What's the feelings about this approach to the tax for the fire department and going behind your back and not letting it come through city council? Man?
Well, you're saying behind my back. I mean, it's not. It was no secret. They want to get a consistent source of funding for the department. I mean, this is sort of the classic. Every department wants this, right? Which is they all want to be not subject to the whims and vagaries of the budget process, because this happened with the library years ago. The library used to be always underfunded. Now the library is the most funded department in the city because they have a mandate from the voters to have a certain percentage of the budget go to the library, which is great on the one hand because we love our libraries and our libraries are amazing. But the downside is when it's crunch time and there's not enough money, critical services are being cut and the library may be awash in money. So But that's a little different with the fire department. You know, the voter threshold is lower when an outside group puts a special tax on the ballot, so that's another reason for them to do that. By doing it the way that they're doing it, it's 50% plus one, versus if we did it as the council, I believe it would be a 2/3 vote. So they were smart to do that in that regard. You know, and the idea is that they'll put a permanent tax, sales tax on there that would go to funding the department on a regular basis. That would help put more money into the department. It's still not going to solve the budget problems for the city, you know, and money is fungible, of course, but I think it ultimately will help create a more stable department. But we also need to rethink, you know, at the end of the day, we also need to start rethinking the department in some ways too. You know, the fire department today is very different than the fire department of 20 years ago. You know, most of the calls are actually not fire, they're ambulance. We've done some of that, like through my innovation fund, we were able to create the fast vehicles that really can be a smaller vehicle to get to certain critical emergencies faster. You know, but as we've seen, when there is a big fire, you want to have a department, but you also want to have the relationships with all the surrounding departments and other cities and other counties. You know, the mutual aid is a critical part of dealing with sort of the big, out of control disasters.
Well, let's talk a bit about what's going on with the Asteria project that's over on Canoga and Burbank. That's being completed fairly, just about coming up pretty soon. Two things going on with that. I know from the fire department, they were concerned because of that may be pulling a lot of resources from just the ambulances having to come and respond to urgent care in those locations. And secondly, give us an update on what the heck is actually going on Canoga Avenue itself with all those barriers that are up, the digging that was going on and what have you. What is that about? Why is that a benefit? And when will it be over if we know?
Yeah. Now, this is a huge project, as you know, and it's the Wisteria project, and LAPD. Oh, no, sorry, LADWP, the Water and Power. They're finishing their underground electrical work, and that should be done sometime soon. After which the power will be underground, and a large utility pole along the project's front will be de-energized and removed. So that's a big part of what we've been seeing. Then DWP water will come into the area behind what's the K-rail, and they'll install a new water main. That's the other thing. And then SoCal Gas has to come in behind the K-rail and relocate their main stations. So there's a lot of things going on. There's a B permit, street improvement work being done behind the K-rail. As I understand it, the date for removal of the K-rail is July 1st of this year, of
And
2020.
they're also going to widen that road out for an extra lane. Is that true?
I think so.
Okay.
I'll double check on that. I don't want to say that for sure.
Well, I know initially we're looking at there being an extra off ramp from on Canoga, an extra lane for Canoga to go that.
Hey,
so it would also it would turn
hey,
right
John,
back. Yes, Dennis.
council member, yeah, they're required to put another lane in on Canoga Avenue.
Yeah, that was that's what I thought. I didn't want to say it for sure until I sort of reminded myself, but that's how I understood it as well. So
Yeah,
that's
that's my understanding as to what they did as part of the initial approval of that. And again, trying to work with Caltrans to get them to give an extra lane that would dovetail right into that is pretty tough to get that done. But hopefully you'll be able to put some pressure on Caltrans to get that done at some point in time, so it will dovetail right into that extra lane. So
just let me give you a couple more things. The existing trees will be removed, and the curbs being moved over, and like I said, an extra lane, and it's supposed to be a deceleration lane from the freeway. Yeah.
Yeah, the
and
idea
then,
is
and then I'm told like all of the street work is supposed to be done by October 15th.
Good luck.
You know, I know, but I'm gonna continue to put pressure on them to move fast. You know, it's a huge project. I agree with you about with all these big projects coming in, especially all these senior projects. You know, we need to have more more resources. Ideally, and I'm pushing for, but I would love to see a new fire station put in the Cronky site at the promenade or something to that effect that would give us more of those resources. And I know they're interested in that as well. They being the fire department. So hopefully we can get something like that going, because I think it certainly will be justified with all of the new folks moving in, especially as you mentioned, a lot of vulnerable communities as well.
Council member, the one thing that I was told, those are very tall buildings, the Wisteria buildings, And I was told that Station 84 doesn't even have a ladder truck.
Right.
So, you know, that's kind of an important thing for when the buildings are starting to be that tall, right? So anyway.
No, absolutely. I mean, your department's gotta, gotta match the geography that we're in, and the Warner Center is becoming like a downtown, so we have to have the equipment to match it.
And that's true. And I think that, again, you can put that pressure on them, especially when budgeting comes up, since you're a master at working with the budgets, having done that in the state as well. Try to make sure that they get those funds. It gets earmarked for something specifically out here to build up what we've got and some of the equipment that we probably need for this location too. Let's talk about what went on a council meeting this morning, specifically on regarding AB 211 and some of the other measures that are there too. As all of us know, and I think a lot of people around here, we have roughly about 100 people that are online presently, that there's been some issues concerning the Woodland Hills Golf Course. And it's not just the golf course alone, but rather that the state has mandated by statute that there be a change in our abilities to have local control over what's going on concerning the development in our communities. Somewhat disrespectful to us. I think that all of us, especially with you, Councilman, we're working with the specific plan up in the 2035 plan and other ones that have gone on, that we've worked hard on trying to make sure that we have appropriate plans going on in our city so that we can handle the developments. And it seems like the state wants to take that away and decide that they're better off on making a determination of whether or not a specific area should be used for certain things. And the problem with AB 211 and with some of the other amendments to that is they now have defined a commercial corridor, as something that's either between 50 feet and 75, between 75 and 150 feet in width. And that becomes a commercial corridor, which brings in a whole bunch of stuff they're able to do by matter of right. And that takes in roads that are a portion of Canoga, for example. It takes in Dumetz, for example. It takes in a whole bunch of other roads. I mean, obviously, Topanga Canyon all the way up.
It may take in Valley Circle next to the cemetery, too.
It does. So it affects everybody, not just here in Woodland Hills, but throughout the entire city. There are roads that have that width to them that now may have been residential only and reserved and zoned for residential only, that are now being upgraded to whatever the state wants it to be, because it's now a commercial zone. And you had a motion that went before council today. Tell us about the motion. And I understand that it was passed unanimously. And so that everybody that doesn't know about it will have an idea what that motion was about and why you presented it.
Right. And just to be clear, you're referring, when you're talking about the state bills, there was AB 2011, which was the underlying bill, which actually, in and of itself, the intent of that bill was not bad. It was to make it easier to build large mixed-use, high-density projects on wide commercial streets. And it was used for various purposes ministerially, like in South LA, they put a Costco next to La Brea, next to the Coliseum. Like, it made sense. But the problem was that was 2 years ago. Last year, the state amended that bill through these other bills, AB 2243 and AB 893. Right. And those bills had provisions that redefined what you're talking about. What is a commercial corridor? That redefined, what the prohibitions on high fire severity zones. And it made these tweaks to AB 2011, which had protections in it for, like, on fire zones, and it removed some of those protections. And that's why we are where we are now, where we have this project that is a big project. As you mentioned, it's 398 units. And it's 223 in 4-story multifamily buildings. It's 175 single-family homes. But what I'm trying to do is work both at the local level and the state level to try to see if there's any way we can give the city the ability to actually review this project. Because a straight reading of the state law is that we don't have discretionary authority anymore on this project. Now, the applicant, they sought vesting, which applicable would mean that they're entitled to city planning rules at the time of the application. But I'm working with Senator Stern's office, and he's been very approachable and very good on this issue, to try to have a bill to see if there's any way to have one that applies retroactively in certain, like, dangerous conditions like fire zones and that kind of thing that would hopefully apply to pending applications as well. We don't know if that's possible yet, but he's looking into that. We worked on including some language in that proposed amendment and getting our city attorney to look at that to try to make it so it would apply to the Woodland Hills Country Club application. But that's still TBD, where the state council has to weigh in on whether that's even possible to write it that way.
Well, Bob, as I looked at it as a lawyer too on that, I think if they can put in some clarification of definitions of certain things of what's meant there. For example, whether or not there has to be that the entire area that's being developed has to be contiguous to a commercial zone road, which, for example, the country club is not, because it's a little offset that comes off of Dumetz at that location. So there's a lot. I think there's some definitional interpretations or clarifications that could be done that might have an effect not only just on this one, but on some of the other projects too. So it's good that you're working with Henry Stern concerning that. So you presented a motion this morning concerning that too.
Right. So this morning, basically what I did was I asked, because there's all these questions, and while I'm a council member, I'm not a legal expert. So I asked the planning department and the city attorney to report back on, what is the real implication of these state laws? What does it mean overall to this project and to the city? And then specifically, do we have any leverage? Is there any legal opportunity as a city that we would have to get discretionary review over this project? Or, what are the options? Because when I just talked to the planning department more informally, I don't get a very good answer. But the answer I get is not very encouraging. So, but I talked to the city attorney herself, and she thought maybe there's some leverage. So to get a formal analysis done, I had to get a motion passed by the council and signed by the mayor that says, spend your time, do this report, do it within 30 days, and a report that outlines the implication of these state laws on our discretionary process, and also whether or not we have any leverage. Because there's also been a lot of people are saying, oh, you should be able to do this, or you should be able to do that. And I say, well, I wish that were true. I hope that's true, but I don't get to decide that. So that's why I did that report, to get something in writing from the people who have the authority to make those decisions. Not the discretionary decisions. As a council member, I get to make those, but in terms of what are the rules of the game, what is allowed, so to speak, under this state law. So I have asked our city attorney and our planning department to come back with a report that will outline a lot of the things that people have been saying, because people come to me and say, well, why can't you use the fire code to do this? And I say, well, I would love to use the fire code, but I'm being told X, Y, and Z. But I shouldn't be the intermediary in there. I need to get something in writing that we can all look at and vet, and lawyers like you and others can look at and formally put it together. Now, just to give you a sense of where things are generally, so the planning department, they got the state laws were signed in October, and then 10 days later or so, that's when they filed this application. Fortunately, the planning department deemed that the application was incomplete because the developer didn't submit all the required documents. So the moment that the planning department deemed it incomplete, it stopped the clock. What clock am I talking about? Under the state law, there is a 90-day shot clock, or review, where the city has to approve or disapprove the project within 90 days. And it has to approve it based on the ministerial administrative code. Not me as a council member. I don't get to decide that. It is the department that checks a box. They did this, they didn't do that, they did this.
And there literally is a checklist for them to go through, for them to do. It's a rather lengthy form, but they have to check off all those little boxes, literally.
They have to check those boxes, and it's not something that I get to say, oh, I don't think they met this box. It's a ministerial decision. So the clock was stopped at day 27. And so when the department said, hey, you don't have all the documents right, they can then come back, and as soon as they submit the corrected documents, the clock starts again with 63 days left to go. So that's the kind of time crunch we're under.
Have they resubmitted?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. But the moment that they do, then we have 63 days. It doesn't restart the clock to 90, as I understand it. It continues it. So they're probably preparing all the documents to resubmit. And normally, normally a project like this would go through the CEQA process, and the entitlements, including the general plan, the zone change, that would come before the city council for consideration, which is when normally that you and I and everybody would engage in the project.
And just for clarification, for everybody's listening, they did come to you and to the community because we met with them before COVID, and they had requested from you ages ago to do a zone change, and you told them no at that particular point, as I understand, and that was a long time ago.
Right, right. We told them no, and they could have come back with all sorts of proposals, and we would have worked with everybody. And I mean, that's how these things go. You basically you start with generally you start with a no, because that's usually there's big problems, and then there's compromise, there's discussion. You work with the community, and you, if appropriate, you figure out a way to get to yes. But we never got to go through that process because the state law intervened.
I do see those questions, and we're going to get to some of those. But the question I have right at the moment is the 30-day time period for the city attorney and the planning department to get back a report to. Will that be a written report that will come to you within hopefully 30 days? I don't know if the mayor's already signed that motion or not at this point.
I hope that I don't know if she signed. I mean, it passed today, so she'll sign it this week, I'm sure.
Okay.
But I asked for a written report. I would not. I do not want an oral report.
Okay. Let's hope that ends up being what they're going to do with that. Are you? I guess what's concerning certainly me and a lot of others was how did we get in this predicament to begin with? The state legislature up there with Weiner, for example, has been proposing this stuff for the past number of years on just attacking left and right the ability of our community specifically and throughout the state to be able to have self-determination on what we're doing with our own planning. And it's just being stripped away and stripped away and stripped away. How do we get here? And how come the city council hasn't done something to be more active in stopping it? Because they're still doing it. And we look at SB 79, for example, too.
Right, now SB 79. I mean, we and the council opposed SB 79. We made it clear to the state that we did not want it. But I mean, this is all being driven by the housing crisis, right? I mean, we have that's a real crisis, and we have a lack of affordability.
Well, but our city has been working to remedy that, and we've taken steps to do it. And yet, the state comes in and says, "We don't care what you're doing. We're going to tell you what you're going to do instead." Is that kind of the thrust of what's going on out of the state?
Yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I agree with you. I mean, that's it's been too heavy-handed. I mean, but you asked me how did we get into this, and I think a big driver of this is the housing crisis, the affordability crisis, the homeless crisis. And while we're doing a lot on the city level, a lot of cities are not doing as much. The RENA numbers, the state puts these numbers out about how much housing every area needs to build, and everyone's missing the mark. All these cities are missing the mark. We're trying, at least as a city in Los Angeles. As a district, we've done pretty well because what we did was we did the Warner Center, and we said, okay, in this area, we're going to protect the single-family homes. We're going to centralize the development here in this 1.9 square mile. The third district is the fastest growing district in the city. It's why when redistricting happened, the district shrunk because we grew so much. But the whole city hasn't done that, and certainly the whole state hasn't done that. There are a lot of states that are much more resistant, even than Los Angeles, to putting in needed housing. So the state has been reacting, and what we're seeing, I think, is a overreaction. On October 10th, I believe it was October 10th, when these bills were signed that we're referring to that impacted us, there were 45 other housing bills that were signed that very day. That was the big day they signed all these bills. That's a lot of legislation dealing with housing. But I get it. I understand that there is a housing crisis right now, and we don't have a lot of great solutions. But I agree with you. The solution is not to override local control and and to do this one size fits all kind of stuff.
Well, I guess it really comes down to who our state legislators are, both in the Senate and for the Assembly, and making sure they're representing our community the way they're supposed to be representing them. I see that we got a number of questions here. Joe Lopez, you've got a question. I see your hand has been up for quite a while. If you will unmute yourself, you can ask your question. And Joe Lopez, or else we'll move on to Heath. Joe, go ahead. You're unmuted.
Yeah, so LA City Fire Battalion Chief, good evening to everybody. I just want to really touch bases and I give a little more context and insight as far as the fire department. I think Councilman's always been so supportive of the fire department, but in reality, I think as we see the Woodland Hills community continue to grow at a like the level that's never been seen before, from the Wisteria project to the renovation of the mall. And then I always think about when I was a rookie here in the area, and then go back to the 50s, the guys are older than me back then, and how the staffing was the same in the 1950s, where they had 6 guys in this little house, looked like a little house on the Prairie Fire Station. And if you look at today, from the 1950s, from the orange groves, no high-rise buildings, and the staffing is the same. And that's really what I think the picture I really wanted to paint on how much has changed and how challenging it's been for the fire department and everything that goes with that. And so one of the things that I always was taught that, and I think it's a good goal, is to always try to leave things better than you got them. And I think if we try to pull in that direction and live up to that, I think that's when I think we're doing good. It's easier said than done, but yeah, here we are.
Well, thank you for your service on that. And I think one of the concerns we have from the fire department, especially, is with this new project at the country club, is the impact it's going to have on being able to get out if there's any kind of an emergency up here and let the fire department be able to do their work. So we're in a heavy fire zone that's up here, and the fire department does great work, but boy, we don't want to make it worse for them. Like you said, we want to take what we've got now and leave it better. It seems like we're taking what we've got now and we're putting the project in the way that it's designed presently. We're not leaving it better, but rather putting a lot of people's lives at risk. Councilman, you got a response to Joe's comment?
No, I mean, Joe, thank you. I mean, I so appreciate the work that you do, and as you said, our fire department is amazing in what they're able to do on with not enough resources. And while I always fight for more resources for our fire department, I mean, we don't have enough resources to do all the things that we need to do, and so it makes sense to try to get more money into the system. But it also, as I was saying earlier, it also makes sense we need to kind of rethink our overall approach too, to fire, to ambulance, to emergencies, and try to figure out how we can not just have more but be more effective. And we've done some of that, and the department's been very creative in that. But that's obviously going to be the key. And there's a lot of new technology too that can be helpful.
Good things. Heath, you had your hand up. You're open. I'm assuming Captain Lopez, did you have anything further? Heath, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Great. And good evening, council member. I have a two-pronged question for you. As you know, the Woodland Hills Warner Center Neighborhood Council passed a community impact statement in support of your motion, and there were almost 200 supporting public comments totaling in excess of 300 pages for your motion. And as you know, with your seniority, you don't get that kind of public input on issues normally. And so there's obviously a lot of interest in the community about this. And, of course, as you talked about, your motion is to have the planning director and the city attorney study the enforceability of the ministerial approvals for the golf course project. And that's great. But can you introduce a moratorium based on, for example, SB 747's requirement of the adequacy of the evacuation routes, first responder access, as Captain Lopez was just talking about, the water availability and so forth up here. The mayor did executive orders, as did the governor after the Palisades fire. Why can't we do this? And this would not be unprecedented for you to do. As you acknowledged at the beginning, you got Warner Center uh, plan over the hump, and we're all grateful for you here in Woodland Hills. But until you could do that, your predecessor, uh, Dennis Zine, put a moratorium on any more developments until these details could be worked out that so many people invested in so heavily. And I know you want to say, well, gee, it's the state law that says, it's ministerial, and so we don't really have any say. But that's not really true. And even this 90-day count, because when you look at the submission for the project, there's just so many reasons why it's a ministerial fail. For example, they don't have their subdivision map approved, and that's a requirement for the state ministerial approval. So it's very easy for the city to take a stand on that. And as John mentioned earlier, they don't have the required 75% of the project against a commercial corridor, and
All
the
right, Heath,
state
Heath,
laws are clear on that.
let the councilman answer your question.
Yeah, there's several questions. I mean, I don't know that we can do what you're saying, which is, we put on a straight moratorium. But that's part of why I'm asking these questions legally, because when I've been looking into it, like you talked about AB 747, which it deals with the evacuation. That's a state law that deals with the evacuation routes. But it doesn't allow us to justify stopping a housing project. It's a requirement that the city analyze evacuation routes. But as far as I understand it, it doesn't give us the ability to use that as a cudgel to stop a project. So similarly, I mean, if there's a way, in terms of, and you say certain things like that they don't meet the ministerial definitions, that's great. I mean, that's the, ultimately, when it's decided ministerially, I don't get to decide that. The planning department checks those boxes and doesn't check those boxes. So if they don't meet the boxes, great, then the project doesn't move forward. But the problem is, some of those boxes they're allowed to correct. So if they don't, just like they had an incomplete project that stopped the clock, they then submit the extra work. So depending on what it is,
Right. But if I may, for the requirement for the subdivision would require the CEQA and the determination of the adequacy of the fire route. So you can stop these things because they don't have the subdivision map. And then if they want to apply,
subdivision is also ministerial under 2011. So that's not a discretionary action by the city when AB 2011 makes subdivision a ministerial action.
We're hoping, Heath, that maybe the city attorney's a position letter may come back and give the city council a little more abilities in that area to be able to utilize some of those to scrutinize these projects to make sure that they're not going to create a hazard for the community. That was never the design of any of the legislation, is to create a hazard for the community, but rather to find some way to increase the housing on the issue. So,
and I should say, Heath, Heath, I hope you're right that there is a way to do this. But every time I thought the same thing under the subdivision thing, and then found out that it was deemed ministerial under 2011. So I've been hitting the wall as I try to be creative on this, which is why I'm asking to have this stuff put in writing by the city attorney, so you can look at it and everybody can look at it and figure out if there's a way. But it's like when you say, oh, you can do it this way, you're telling me that, but then I go to the planning department and I'm told no, that you can't. So that's why the best thing to do is have it all out there in writing, and whatever. If you have any creative ideas you have, I am willing to try to to run them down and see if there's a way. I readily admit great ideas come from all sorts of places. So someone here on this call may have a route that we didn't think of, and I will run it down with my team, and we'll try to figure out if that provides the leverage on something.
You mentioned before that you're working with State Senator Henry Stern. Is there something specific that he's working on, or where are you with that process? Is he presenting something before the state legislature? Where are we? And then also, what's going on with our assembly member, with Jesse Gabriel? We haven't heard from him on this stuff at all. And we've invited him here numerous times over the years, and he hasn't shown up. Unlike you.
Well, in terms of the legislation, we're talking about trying to modify, parking as a principally permitted use, changing some of the definitions, the kinds of things that you would imagine, and he is going now to the state attorney's office. I'm trying to ledge counsel, I guess.
Ledge counsel, yeah.
To try to get them to put, there was a deadline to get, placeholder. He got that in, and now he's working with them, and we're working with him to try to get some of those things, like to not allow AB 2011 projects in high fire severity zones. Like, that would be a great change to make in the law, because that's how it was when it was written. You were not in AB 2011 did not allow projects in high fire severity zones, but then the follow-on legislation that was just signed this last year changed it and allowed it. So maybe there's a way to change it back. And even if there is a way to change it back, then there's that secondary question of, can you change it back just prospectively, or can you go back to projects that are already pending? And that is more complicated, unfortunately.
Yeah, substantively does not go back, procedurally does. So it's a question that they'll have to work out. What's going on with Assemblyman Jesse Gabriel? Have you had any communications with him, or has he gone dark on you too?
I would urge you to check in with himself. He has not been quite as collaborative as Senator Stern, but he's a good guy, and I urge you to work with him, and I'm sure he'll want to help solve this.
Well, I hope that's going to be the case. I think we need to have something that's going to get done on that. Ali, it looks like you had your hand up, and you can unmute if you wish and have a question.
Sorry, it's Alex, Ali's husband.
Oh, Alex, okay. Thank you. Go ahead. I see her up on the board. Go ahead with your question.
So just to give a little update, we actually had a meeting with Jesse Gabriel today.
Tell us about that.
And
keep your voice up a little bit too for us.
Is this better?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Yelling into the laptop now. And he kind of turned it back onto the city matter. And he said that this is something the city does have control over. He really turned it right back around. He did promise to do some things up in Sacramento, to have some conversations, to have a little more definition of the law. But he said that, his office actually looked at the application of AB 2011 and that they see some issue with the application for this particular project, that it should not apply. But then he really did turn it back around to the city, and he says, you need to work with your, which is what you're doing. He says, you need to work with your city attorney. He was going to actually talk to the attorney general as well. And to make sure that it meets all the requirements, and his office thinks that it does not.
Did he indicate why he felt that their application does not meet the requirements under 2011 and the amendments to it? Or was just given a general statement?
It was a general statement, but I believe that it had something to do with the definitions of the type of property that it is right now, and the type of property that's required for this type of development as a commercial corridor.
Well, hopefully they'll be able to get something done with it that'll make some kind of sense to people, because it seems, Councilman, unless you disagree with me, it seems like it's causing more problems than we had really anticipated, especially in this situation with the golf course.
And the other thing is, obviously, time is of the essence on this. So I do appreciate the 30 days. And since their application is incomplete, I think that also is a good place for us to be. But something needs to be done right away. I mean, this is one of those things where right now, our government has an opportunity to take a proactive approach to our safety. And one of the things that I pointed out to Jesse Gabriel is there's a difference. The fire was right at Dirt Mulholland. We live basically on the golf course, and we could see the flames from our house. Our house actually has roof sprinklers. They were ready to go, but we could see the flames. But here's the difference between the Palisades and our house. The Palisades had nice wide streets. They had many points where you could come and go. This area does not. While Canoga is 70 feet wide where the driveway is proposed, 700 feet to the south, Canoga is 28 feet wide. You're going to have cars funneling down, and all it's going to take is for people to be coming out of that driveway. It's 400 homes. So let's assume 1,000 cars. How is that going to work on one street? And, you know, as it stands, when we were asked to evacuate, Canoga was already busy. And that's just with the people that are living here now. And we were thinking to ourselves, worst case, we'll walk out onto the golf course. There's a water feature. We won't die. What's going to happen if this development goes through and now everyone's trying to leave? What's going to happen when everyone's trying to leave in the morning to go to work and school? How is this going to work? This cannot be allowed to go through. And I'm not anti-development. Let's just follow the normal steps. Let's look at traffic. Let's look at water availability. Let's look at sewer availability and power and everything else. That's how normally these types of projects are done. What we're looking at here is a ridiculous way to do this.
I know that many years ago I talked with the country club and said that anytime we have a fire alert for up here or even a high wind time, to unlock those gates. So if anything was to occur, that we would have access to be able to get in there, either walk in or even driving a car in if we needed to. Because if things were to get backed up here, we have no place to go except into that open zone that they now wish to take away. So Bob, keep that in mind too, that there may be, especially in this project, there has to be something that if we do find there's some discretionary stuff, that we can do some things to make sure that we all are going to be heavily protected on that. Heath, you had your hand up before. Did you have something further that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, just to continue on what's been said earlier, it would be great, Bob, if you could arrange to get City Attorney Feldstein Soto and her chief of staff, Kevin James, out here along with Vince Bertoni, the director of planning, and, you know, the fire chief and the mayor to tour these spaghetti streets. You've been up here, you know the conditions, and, you know, your office gets called with all the parked cars on, you know, the windy days, and you know how many calls you get for the fallen eucalyptus trees and pepper trees. And in a strong wind, which you would have with a fire, people are not going to get out. So this is life and death. And
I agree. I agree with Heath, and I agree with the previous speaker. But I don't think it's a question of convincing the city attorney or the mayor of the issue. We have to figure out a way under the law that we have some leverage, because the mayor doesn't get to make this decision either. It's if you know, as I said, if there is a way where we can get discretionary action, and as Mr. Lehrman was saying, you know, go through the normal process, that's great. That's what we want. That's how these things. If this had been proposed 3 months ago, that's how it would have happened. We would have gone through. We would have had CEQA analysis. We would have been able to talk about those issues. The problem with the way that the state law appears to work is that it removes that discretion from us, from our being able to have those, you know, that kind of a leverage. But if we can get it back, either through some legal means, or if there's a a change in the state law, or if there is some point that can change this from ministerial to discretionary, or if there is a aspect of the ministerial process that this project will fail on, that's great.
Right, but the
Bob,
mayor,
wait, hold on.
Alex, go ahead. You wanted to ask.
Wait, let me ask one quick question here.
Go ahead.
If we could convince the governor to get involved and rescind what he signed, could that be done? Could this whole thing come to a fast and beneficial end?
I don't know the answer to that, because it's tricky, and as John pointed out, with rights that are vested, generally speaking, the rules apply at the time of vesting. So even if we change the rules now, like with ED1, you remember when ED1 passed, it wasn't supposed to apply to, this was a executive directive from the mayor, and it allowed for streamlined housing approval in multifamily areas. But the way it was written, people interpreted it to apply in single-family home areas. And there were several projects proposed in the 3rd District, including Woodland Hills, that that would apply to ED1. I objected to that. I got the council to agree with me on that. We went to court and we lost. We lost because they said that it wasn't until, because we got the mayor to clear up the ED1 the next day, and to make it clear that it did not apply to single-family zones. But the court said, well, that wasn't clear at the day that these people applied, and they had these vesting rights, and therefore we have a couple of projects that'll be 7 stories tall next to single-family homes in the 3rd District that I opposed, that I got the city council to oppose, that the mayor opposed, but that the court said nope. The vesting right was at the time that it started, and
Marty, that is the general rule is that if it's procedural, you can go retroactive. If it's substantive, you can't go retroactive on what you're changing from a substantive standpoint. So that's part of the vesting issues to it, and that's the general rule that has to be done. These are not procedural things, unfortunately. They're probably much more substantive. So I don't know if that's able to be done. But listen, all avenues that can be explored should definitely be explored under these circumstances. That's definitely for sure. We had some, I think it was Mr. Leekman. I think that you had some more questions you had on somebody raised your hand again. Was something you needed clarification on?
I just, one thing I wanted to ask is if there's any kind of emergency declaration that could be made to help take this off the fast track, number one. And number two, I believe we've had some attorneys look at things and they have opinioned on it. And I think we can get that over to the councilman's office.
I'd certainly like to see one of those too, if you would be able to send it over to me at John at WHHO.com. I'd like to take a look at those as well. There's a number of things that might be able to be done as far as challenging some of these laws generally as being unconstitutional to begin with, but that's another issue, and it's very, very difficult, very time consuming, and very expensive as well. Jacqueline, I see you had your hand up as well. Do you have a question?
I do. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Awesome. Thank you, John Walker. Thank you, Councilman Blumenfield. I just wanted to extend upon the offer that Heath and Alex had made. We understand that you know these streets. I had someone in sitting planning tell me that they understood the concerns of this neighborhood because they've entered through the golf course from Dumetz. And I, laughed to myself thinking that is not the area that we are concerned about, right? Spaghetti Canyon is the area of most concern. So while I understand that there are high priority items that everyone is working and considering, since we feel a bit like we're frogs boiling in a pot, it would go a long way for the folks who are making this decision to come and see the land that they're talking about and see the streets. So please do extend our offer to give tours of the neighborhood, to give tours of Spaghetti Canyon, because I think a lot of people, they don't get it until they see it.
Yeah.
And at some point, this is going to require some bravery and understanding of the conditions. And I'm speaking from learning that many of our new neighbors came here from the Palisades, and many of us have connections to the Palisade fires or the Eaton fire. So it's on top of everyone's mind, of course, with the anniversary.
Right. I mean, I agree with you, and I'm happy to extend, to urge people to come visit. But part of the question is who is making the decision, and so I just want to question the. You say, oh, get the mayor here so she can see. If it's ministerial, she doesn't get to make the decision. So that's sort of a threshold question as well. And at the end of the day, I imagine this is going to end up in court one way or the other. Because if the city meaning the planning department says, oh, we have to do it ministerial, despite my, protest to that effect, I'm going to push every way I can. But if they decide that, then probably, community groups, perhaps this one, would sue. And if they go the opposite way, and if I successfully, somehow get them to disapprove it, or we make it into discretionary, then the developer is certainly going to sue. Either way, this probably ends up in the courts, I would imagine. But we'll cross those bridges when we get to them. But it may be a question of, depending on how it rolls out, of who ends up actually initiating the lawsuit. But at the end of the day, some of these questions are going to be decided by a judge.
Of course, we'd rather have the developer do the lawsuits rather than us because of situations. But nonetheless, Jim Heimler, last question for us. We're getting late. Go ahead, Jim. Keep it short.
Hey, Councilman Jim Heimler.
Keep your voice up too, Jim.
Ideas. Can you hear me?
Yeah, a little louder.
So what things I've done in the past is I've had trails kind of vacated, so we could actually narrow Canoga where we need to, which sounded like about the 700 feet, and just narrow it. Or you could dedicate property to the private people for a certain period of time, narrow the road down. That way the definitions are irrelevant. We just get below the threshold. And we could do a small Santa Monica, big Santa Monica type of thing on Canoga, break it in half. You got two different street names, solves the same issue. So there's a lot of, I think, just technical things that the city could do. And I've seen that happen overnight on properties down on Exhibition, where a city just changes something without anybody's input. So that something like that could easily be done and no changes.
That's an interesting point, Jim. That may be something to take a serious look at of rechanging the actual width of those roadways. That's an event that may vacate the ability. It's an impossibility for them to be able to meet those requirements then. So that's interesting. So we'll see what can end up being done with those things on that. Councilman, we want to.
It's a creative idea. I'm happy to look into it. I mean, we would obviously need buy-in from the community, to be able to do something like that. But let's look at everything we can. I mean, I appreciate the conversation with all of you, but also the brainstorming. So thank you. Because this is new ground, right? I mean, this is not
for all of us.
Yeah, no, for all of us. I mean, I want to be clear about this is not something I can say. Oh, in years past we've done this, and this, because this is a whole new law that we're trying to deal with and figure out what the solutions are.
Well, we know if you get up to the state senate that you'll take some handle on those things. First, we'd like to truly thank you for your work that you've done in the community, especially for coming out here to the Woodland Hills Homeowners Organization. You've done so religiously for the past 8 years of your tenure here with us.
Well,
you serve the community, and we deeply appreciate that. We appreciate you recognizing the importance of what we end up doing and putting us a lot of our members onto certain of your boards to be able to help with that as well. We hope that in coming times if you go to the state senate, you go to someplace else, that you'll keep us in mind and come back to us and let us know what things are going on. And especially as this particular development with the Woodland Hills Country Club comes along, that you'll come back to us and let us know some of the updates. I think that's going to end up happening probably sooner rather than later, especially after the city council gets the report back from the attorneys. But we do want to thank you. We want to thank our members. We want to thank the people that joined us for this evening. We've had over 100 people that have been with us tonight and listening to us and putting good ideas in. Sorry we couldn't get to all the questions or all the things that are on that. Time just doesn't allow us sometimes to do that. But we hope to be able to do that in the future too. Reminder, join our organization, $25 a year. We help us for all of us trying to do some things and to make our community even better to that. So Councilman, God bless. Thank you for the work that you're doing. May you continue to have Godspeed in doing the work to make our community even better and even safer. And we appreciate the work that you've done on that one. So
Thank you.
with that, we'll say good night to you. And this recording will be up within a couple of days with the time for those that wish to go back to it or haven't had a chance to review it. And we'll let you know about that as well. So God bless. Have a pleasant evening, and we will all talk again.
Great. Thanks so much.
Good
Take
night
care.
to you.